Thanks so much, Jess, and welcome everybody. Great to see you all. Great to be with you. So I want to share with you 3 stories, but before I do, I want to share my story very quickly. So I am actually in an Encore career. And what I'm finding is that I have my own business and I'm also working inside an organization. So I have this inside-outside combination, which is something that I have wanted throughout my entire career. This ability to balance autonomy with connection, and I really couldn't have this until I reached this point. This point in my career. This encore point. So that's my story. And now let me just share with you 3 stories that I think are going to be really useful here, and see if you can see yourself in these 3 stories. The first story it's about Joy, and it's about Dave. And Dave is a communications and development executive at a really large nonprofit whose mission he really, really deeply believed in. And he'd been promoted to a very high-level executive role because of his potential, even though he was 61 years old at the time. And so our executive coaching was focusing on this transition into this new role. And one day during the coaching, he confided in me that he just couldn't picture himself doing this anymore. After 15 years in his organization, whose mission he still loved, he was really burnt out. So I asked him what he would do if he were sort of freed up from the hard, challenging, grind that he found himself in each day. And he said right away, without missing a beat, he would get back to walking. He walked 8 miles a day. He would get back to his musical roots. He had a number of writing projects, no shortage of ideas. He was not, though, in a position to retire at that point. So the coaching really shifted focus to how he could recapture the joy that he lost. Dave. So the next story is about Mickey, right? Mickey was a Renaissance man. So Mickey had a whole range of different gifts, right? He started out as an officer in the Marine Corps. He then opened up a camp for troubled youth. He then worked his way up the ranks within several sales organizations to finally reach the pinnacle at the sea level. And the entire time he was always doing things on the side with his hands, working on a deck, redoing the basement, creating the artwork that was on his walls. So he found himself in this place where there was a transition after a restructuring, and he had a severance package that gave him some time and some space to think about what it was that he really wanted to do. And he, using his creative mind, didn't start where many of us would, which is what is the next job that he wants. He started with, instead, which of this vast array of skills that he had did he want to indulge? So Mickey. And then the last story is about worlds, the needs of the world, and it's about Colleen. Colleen's first career transition was from journalism to medicine. She became a physician. Pretty big transition, right? Despite the pull of what she actually called her calling, right? After several decades practicing as a physician, she found herself really sort of feeling like she was in a rut and getting restless with the routine of caring for patients each day. So she started to do some work around research and bring that in, right? Research allowed her to actually indulge the writing that she had done earlier in her career. That was complemented nicely by teaching. So she worked on this whole plan to bring together a teaching and research function that she'd bring into her organization that would make good use of her gifts. And she got excited about this. The problem was that the organization didn't have a need for this. There was no place for it. So frustrated, she went back to her routine of caring for patients. Now, she never lost sight of the fact that this was her mission, right? So she maintained that sense of obligation. And what she did was she shifted her exploration to the next chapter in ways that she could contribute to the world in new ways. That's Colleen. I'm hoping that as you have listened to these 3 stories that you're finding yourself in them, that you're seeing some themes, right, that are consistent across it. Because what I really saw in this is the 3 of them all working really hard to answer 3 essential life questions. The first question, what brings you joy? The second question, are you good at it? Or what are you good at? And the third one is, does the world need you to do it? Or what does the world need from you? And as you heard, each of them went through their own exploration process. And each one of them tackled a different one of these and did it in a different way. And it brought them, as a result, to different trajectories. So what we're going to do now is drill down into each of these in a little bit more detail before we then jump into and get very pragmatic when Susan comes up and talks about some of the specific things you do around these questions. So let's take them one at a time. So the first question, what brings you joy? Call it passion, if you like. In fact, there's a very interesting career theorist who actually took that passion and turned it into an acronym, which in essence covers the three questions we just talked about. The important thing here, though, is that when we're talking about joy, we're not talking about the same thing as happiness. I have nothing against happiness. It's wonderful. And there's a lot of research on happiness. But where I'm going is a little less fleeting, because happiness can be fleeting. Joy is a sense of congruence, a sense that I'm doing what I'm meant to be doing. My wife, Terry, one of my heroes, she's an amazing human being, amazing mother. She was not happy when our 2-year-old Jake was up in the middle of the night crying and throwing up because he was sick, but it brought her joy because as a mother, she was doing what she was meant to be doing. A computer coder that I worked with a number of years ago was not happy when they found that they went into the office and the program that they supported had a bug. But they rolled up their sleeves at 8 a.m. and now it's 3:30 in the afternoon. They looked up. Where did the time go? That's a very important clue that I may be doing something that has me in a state of joy if I'm losing track of time. So remember Dave? Going back to Dave for a minute. This is the question that he was wrestling with. We are in an epidemic of burnout now. I can't tell you how many conversations I'm having with folks where they're in this place of burnout and don't even have the space, the energy to be able to make the time to start to answer this question. And to kind of figure out how they can find this joy that they're missing. So I'd like to offer up just a couple of sort of sub-questions to help explore if this is the question that's resonating for you. So one of them is around when you lose track of time, what is it that you're doing when you lose all track of time? What are your long lost hobbies and pastimes that maybe you've left? What are the questions that keep drawing you in? One of the things that I heard again recently with another career theorist that was really fascinating. She talks for folks and has them look at two questions. One of them is, when you were a kid and you were playing, what were you playing at? Or what did you say when people asked you what you wanted to be when you grew up? Now, maybe the answer is, firefighter, right? And you're not going to be a firefighter, but what's behind the answer? That's where we're tapping. Or another great question. If you could go back to college right now and major in anything, no holds barred, what would that be? So these are the questions around what brings you joy. The next one, of course, is what are you good at, or are you good at it? Are you good at that joy? Now, I frame it both ways because there's a nice logical flow here, right? If I know what brings me joy, then I know if I'm good at it, and then I know if the world needs me to do that. That's a nice flow. It's not always quite so neat and clean, right? So what are you good at, right? And what we're talking about here is talent, your talents, your gifts. You might use the word skills. I go broader. I'm a purist. I like the term competency, which is not just your skills, but it's the knowledge you bring forward, the abilities you have, the aptitude you have to learn other things, all that. This is what we're talking about, those things that you're good at. This is where Mickey started, and this is where his exploration centered. One of the things that he had to wrestle with first, as he started to begin to sort through these, he had to actually take a step back and look at sort of being honest with the gifts and skills that he brought forward into the corporate world. And that led him actually to a deeper exploration of the joy question, because he brought him to this place of saying, I think I was seeking power, wealth, the trappings, and that wasn't bringing me joy.
And that informed his question as he now started to go into these talents that he has, to be able to look at these talents and say, I never allowed myself the time to think about, or I'm sorry, not even the talent, the space, I'm not allowed to indulge these things because I actually love doing them, right? And it allowed him the space to go into that place. Which of his talents that he had would be most viable for him to develop further? So as we're all asking this question of what am I good at? Unlike that first question, this is when we need input from others. The first question about joy is an inward-looking space, something that we only really know. With skills, really, we are our own worst critic. So one of the first sub-questions to think about when pondering this question is, who really knows what I can do and what I can't? That ties to the next one around how do I form my trusted cluster? I'm sure in the Q&A, we'll talk quite a bit about networking. That's always the answer when it comes to careers. It's always the answer. But break that down. One of the ways to look at networking is that we have 3 concentric circles. The trusted cluster is that inner circle, the folks you really trust. We typically, there's a school of thought out there that says we need 3 friends. One friend that's just going to have fun with you. One friend who's just going to tell you how great you are. And one friend who's going to tell you have spinach in your teeth. That's the friend you need for this. Someone who's going to give you an honest assessment of what you're really good at. And the last is, do I have the courage to even ask the question? My son is earlier in his career, but he's at a bit of a crossroads right now. And we were talking the other day, and I suggested, what if he starts to talk to some of the folks that he's not getting the jobs from and ask them the question and get the feedback? And he said, I can't. I just don't have the courage right now. He's not in a good enough place. He'll get there, but he's not there now. It requires some courage. So the final question is, does the world need you to do it? Or what does the world need from you? This is about purpose, right? It's about your why. Simon Sinek talks about what is your why. World, though, is pretty unwieldy. So let's break that down just a little bit. We're not talking about the whole world. What we're talking about is your world, the place that that surrounds you. A couple quick anecdotes. Terry, my wife, and remember my hero, Terry, once left a job that it brought her great joy. She was really good at it, and the place where she worked really needed her to do that thing. She left it because in church one day, she got this really strong feeling that the church itself, that church that we belong to, is what needed her next. That community is where she was needed. A close friend of mine, she left the workforce to care for her mother because her mother was ill. Her mother needed her. Her mother was her world, right? So she went. The world in Colleen's story was her organization, right? And her organization did not need those couple of things that she brought forward. So that left her to go down and further explore this why, which brought her to the question of joy, of purpose, so that she could explore that in her next chapter. She never left, though, the worthy vocation, the personal obligation she felt around caring for patients. That continued to be a core driver for her. So when answering this question, a few things to kind of dig underneath this is, so how do I define my world? Who are the most important people around me? What are the causes that move me? And there's that courage question again. If I ask this question, I find the answer, do I have the courage to act on what I find? So with that said, what I'd like to do is just a quick poll with you, because Susan and I would love to hear which question of those 3 most resonates for you. So you should be able to see a poll on your screen, and we would just ask if you just click on the question that most resonates for you, and I'll be quiet while you're contemplating. Okay, so I'm hoping you all can see on the screen. It looks like from this that the question of joy resonates with most folks, about 60%, but the other ones still resonate for you, about 16% around that skills question, and then that third one of does the world need you to do it? So my take on this is it's wonderful because oftentimes the questions center around how do I assess my skills? That's very, very important, but it's in this larger context. What this says to me is that you all are really pondering these big questions. So thank you. I'm going to now hand it over to Susan. And Susan's going to roll up her sleeves with you and now start to get underneath this and talk very pragmatically about how we think about these three questions in really pragmatic, real terms.
Thank you, Ted. So welcome, everybody. We are about to embark on a path to your career, your Encore career, and to explore if you're really ready to transition to your second act. So you've all decided to attend this webinar on Encore Careers for a reason, and no doubt there are many different reasons amongst all of you. But for certain, I'm sure that most likely you're asking yourself a lot of questions about your future right now. So whatever brought you here, whether you're retired or you're thinking of retiring, or perhaps you're unemployed or not feeling excited anymore about your current job, or maybe you suddenly have a strong desire to do something that's going to hold more meaning for you or have impact, make a difference. Whatever the reason is, you most likely are feeling like you've reached a crossroad in your life. So before we really dive in, I'd like to take a moment and take our second poll. And Ted and I would love to know why you decided to attend this webinar. So if you could just take a second and respond to which category fits you best. We'll take about 5 seconds and then we'll show the poll. Wow, so looks like we have a lot of different reasons, a really good mix of people that are here that are at various stages in their journey. So thank you for sharing that. So as I mentioned before, you're most likely asking yourself a lot of questions about your future. I like to call these questions crossroad questions, and they usually will fall into one of several categories. So you might be searching for what actually is an Encore career. Where do I begin? Where do I find resources and support that I might need? How do I find new meaning and purpose in my life? How can I make a difference with my work? Why am I feeling this way? Why am I feeling disconnected? And when is the right time for me to make this major change? So in this brief presentation, we're going to take a look at a few of these crossroad questions. So first, let's take a look at the what question. What actually is an Encore, or what I like to call a second act career? And some people are now talking about third act careers. This is actually a much more difficult question to answer than you might imagine, because it can mean so many different things depending upon your own personal goals for your future, or what the drivers are that are motivating you to begin this exploration of reinvention in the first place. And the first poll showed us that there are a lot of different reasons. But by definition, an Encore or second act career is defined as work in the second half of one's life. And it typically will consist of a combination of these 4 major elements: passion, or what Ted called joy, flexibility, impact, and income. So for the majority of people seeking their second act, if you can somehow or other define a pathway that's going to link your skills and experience with your passion, something that brings you joy, in a role that will have a positive and meaningful impact on society and meaning and purpose for your life, and ideally you can derive some level of income, you've actually just taken the first step to describing what your second act might actually look like. And that is the what. So now let's take a look at the where question. Where do I begin? In terms of finding a career path that will lead you to your Encore, research tells us that there are actually 6 major key public interest sectors that all Encore careers, the majority tend to be clustered into. And they are education, environment, health and wellness, social service, government, and the nonprofit world. Some of your own research is going to help you identify the most likely places to explore your career path in terms of what resonates with you. So now what I'd like to do is take a look at the how question, which is probably the most important question. How do I begin? How do I get from my crossroad to my Encore? And what are some of the steps that I can consider taking to help me get there? The thought of launching a second act career can be exciting, but it can also be really daunting. So I'd like to take this transition process and break it down into these 6 steps for you. So the first step we're going to look at is to dream. So what actually does that mean? I like to challenge people to dare to reimagine themselves and be totally open to explore all possibilities at the beginning of this journey and really aspire to do something that is going to bring you joy and meaning in your life. And so there are essentially, in order to do this, in order to dream big or dream out loud, that my father would always encourage me to do, you really need to start thinking outside the box. You need to actually remove all of the preconceived notions that you have created. And our minds are really great at doing that. And any notions that other people in your world may have put into your head. Family and friends are also good at that. So there may also be some parameters that might limit your ability to dream big, like concerns about money or your skill set or your experience level, what others are thinking about your ideas, or anything else that might get in your way. So what you need to do is just to remove all this, what I call brain clutter, that's getting in your way, and just start dreaming big. Don't let anything stop you. Wherever your imagination takes you, go there. I like to suggest that people start a reinvention journal. Get a book, keep it with you all the time, write down all of the possible pathways and options you can think of. So you may find it helpful to organize all of these ideas that are flowing through your head into these 5 major pathway options. Repurposing your current profession, monetizing your passion or hobby. Some of you asked those questions ahead of time about that. Exploring what, as Ted said, what the world needs, or what you want to give to the world, your causes, your callings. All of you have inherent gifts and talents, and maybe you figure out a way to amplify those. Or you can look in your own backyard, in your own world, and begin to engage in your local community needs. So one thing that I do when I work with people live is I use a simple worksheet to help people with this dream big exercise. And if we could have the next slide. I call it the Encore bucket list. And it's really taking those 5 major funnels and just start filling in the boxes. And you can keep that with you at all times too. So let's go on to step 2. Step 2 is what I call the reset. Anytime you're looking to make a change in your life, you need to look at the 3 C's in life, what I like to call the 3 C's. Basically asking yourself, are you willing to make the choice, to take a chance, to make the change that you really want? And at this point, I want to take some poetic license and give Ted credit, and I'm going to add a 4th C, which is courage, because making a change definitely takes courage. So when you're at this reset and trying to figure out if you're really ready to do this, you really need to ask yourself some self-reflection questions. Like, are you really willing to take a step back to go forward? Do you need to get some new skills? Do you need to retrain or retool yourself? Are there courses that you need to take, certifications? There were a number of questions that came in ahead of the webinar on that. And are you being realistic about your goals and experience? This is actually a perfect time in the transition process to take an honest self-assessment test. There are many that are available online and that are free. In fact, Harvard Career Services offers one, or you might want to partner with a private coach like Ted or myself or anybody else in your circle who can guide you through this in a more formalized self-assessment. So let's move on to step 3. Step 3 is defining your pathway. So once you've determined that you really are what I call reinvention ready, and you've written down all the possibilities in your reinvention journal or on your Encore bucket list, you need to determine which option or which pathway you're going to pursue. The pathway that's going to take you to where you want to go to make this shift into your second act. And there are many possibilities, but they typically fall into these categories. You can downshift, going from full-time to part-time, doing what you're already doing in love. You can freelance or become a consultant. You can create what I call a gig portfolio, and it sounds like that's what Ted did for his second act, is taking several different things that you really love to do and cobbling them together into a portfolio of second act. You can take your expertise and become a coach or a mentor or a recruiter, or you can begin teaching. You can start your own business or a nonprofit. And then the last 2, internships, fellowships, returnships, and volunteering, these are all other options. They're wonderful ways for you to try out different things that you're thinking about doing. And it's also a great way to build your network. So what I'd like to do right now is pause again and take another poll, which is, which of these pathways are you interested in exploring? And please feel free to choose more than one. It would be interesting to see what might be getting you excited right now. And we'll take about 5 seconds and then show the results. Wow, we really are many pathways across the board except for recruiting. But that is really, really interesting. Wow, I'm glad that everyone is coming up with different ideas. So let's move on to step 4. So this step actually requires some serious, honest self-reflection to determine what is really holding you back to take the chance to make the change, to muster the courage to take the chance to make this change. Is it time? Is it money? Is it training? Is it support? What can you do to remove these initial obstacles that are really keeping you stuck from beginning this journey? Keep in mind, and I like to remind people all the time, this is what I call remove and rinse. You're going to run into this obstacle course over and over again during this entire journey. You may remove the initial obstacles, and then there'll be other obstacles that will come up, but don't get frustrated. You will achieve your goal. So let's go on to step 5, which is what I call the transition toolbox. Everybody needs a toolbox. And you need one as well if you're going to really transition from your crossroad questions to your second act. So once you've identified and eliminated the first round of obstacles, you need to take a look inside your toolbox to see what's there, but more likely what's missing. So to help you get started, there are actually 3 major categories of tools that I like to talk about. The first is marketing collateral. So all of you have picked, there's a wide range of pathways that seem to resonate, regardless of the path you've chosen. Whether you want to teach, or you want to be a consultant, or you want to start your own, whatever it is, you need to promote yourself and your skills and your expertise. So you need marketing collateral, and we could spend a lot of time just talking about that topic. You also need a robust network. Ted and I have both mentioned this a little bit. I am a huge proponent of continuously building your network. Statistics tell us that at least 85 to 90% of all careers, whether it's first, second, third act, are found and become a reality through networking. So that is really a critical step. And the third thing, of course, is resources. So the world is your oyster when it comes to resources. There are an incredible number of books and webinars like the one you're attending today, courses, organizations, websites, the list goes on and on, that all focus on Encore Careers. So make sure that you tap into that. And of course, your network becomes part of your resources as well. And last but not least, step number 6 is goals. Now, this is not the first time, and it won't be the last time, that you've heard about the importance of setting goals. This could be a workshop all unto itself, but setting goals and determining a deadline and the specific steps that you need to take in order to accomplish that goal, it's absolutely crucial to accomplishing great things in your life, including launching your second act career. So working towards a goal with a deadline, it directs your action, it keeps you motivated, and it also keeps you accountable to your plan. So just in closing, I always like to remind people that are on this transition journey to your encore, your second act, to quote one of my favorite Chinese philosophers, the journey of 1,000 miles starts with one step. And I want to congratulate all of you who have come here today, because you've actually just taken the first step. So thank you.
Thank you, Susan, and thank you, Ted, as well, for those presentations. I think you gave a lot of really useful tips there and frameworks. And now we're ready to move on to the Q&A session, where Ted Witherell and Susan Kelly will respond to your questions. So we did receive quite a few pre-submitted questions, and our team has gone through those to identify some common themes. But those of you attending, obviously can send us your questions now as well. I do apologize for the little snafu with the chat at the beginning, where we're trying to get all your locations, but the QA is working just fine. And if you type in your question for Susan or Ted, we'll be sifting through those, as well as speaking to some of the pre-submitted questions. So I wanted to, kick it off with a question that came in from someone when they were registering. I think is a good starting point. The question was, is there an age or a career point where it is too late to transition to an encore career? Susan, can I ask you to start us off with your response to that?
I have a one-word response: never. It's never too late to reinvent yourself. I really, truly, believe in that. And I've worked with many people at various ages, 50 something, 60 something, 70 something, and even a couple of 80 something people that have actually looked to reinvent themselves. So I don't let anything stop you. And age absolutely should not be one of them. Thank you.
Another question that came in on the pre-submitted questions, that it came up actually from a couple of different registrants, but amounting to the same question. how do I identify my best transferable skills? And Ted, since that I think relates to that self-assessment, sort of self-reflection piece that you were talking about, I wondered if you could speak to that one.
Sure, sure. Yeah, and thanks for that question. I would say, let me hit on a couple of different levels. So starting out, there's the research, right? So, going to the library, right? Beginning to kind of do some homework on what are the kinds of organizations out there that do this kind of thing. So there's a little bit of that to sort of begin the job sites, et cetera, as a beginner. But I should say, and I believe networking is the main answer to this, right? And it goes back a little bit to that trusted cluster, which I can say more about in a few minutes, but it really goes into that networking question. Really, it's the way to kind of start to really understand and get crisp around what my skills are is to ask folks what they really are, because we are our own worst critics. And when I think about networking, I'll give you one specific example. I was on my sort of second ring, if you will, right? Not my inner circle, but my inner circle connected me to someone in the next circle out. When I was making a career transition much earlier in my career from being a traditional classroom teacher to being I wanted to move into corporate training. And it was at a time when the economy was kind of in a downturn. So I met with someone at one of the large insurance companies, nearby on an informational interview. And the person really sort of, in a sense, kind of read me the riot act. Like, in essence, who do you think you are? Because I came in with the attitude of, I was a teacher, therefore I can be a trainer. And this person, it was very much a wake-up call for me. And what that person ended up doing was directed me to the American Society for Training and Development, for example. That was a resource that then helped me to go read and learn the language that was used in that. So I could start to learn the difference between, in that case, andragogy and pedagogy, right? So that's one example of, I think, how the networking thing can lead you to some of these other resources to be able to start to figure out which of your skills are most useful.
I might just add something to that also. So in one of the things that I suggest that people do is, once they start figuring out like the pathway that they might want, is to actually start looking at job descriptions of those particular roles and looking at what companies or organizations are actually looking for in skills. And it's almost like a reverse engineering. As you know, I ran an executive search firm for 35 plus years, and we used to reverse engineer job descriptions all the time to find candidates with the right skills. So if you start back engineering job descriptions, you'll begin to see like what the organizations that you're interested in, or the companies or the field, what are the common elements that they're looking for. And it's going to sort of re-energize you that, wait a minute, I can do this, I have that skill. And you can begin to make a list of your transferable skills. And also working with a coach will help you figure out which of these skills are most marketable.
Just to add one quick thing, what are the keywords? I love it, right? What are the keywords that start to show up? That gives you an idea for the volume, but also it starts to give you the language that's being used. Great point.
Exactly.
Yeah, that's a really helpful insight. So one of the other questions that people were wondering about as they were registering was, kind of boils down to when I'm presenting myself, or I'm framing myself as in pursuit of this new role that's a little bit different to what I've been doing before. How do I sort of position my skill set in a way that speaks to that, the direction I'm heading, rather than just where I've come from? Ted, do you think you could?
Yeah, I could jump on that. I would start out by really kind of a continuation of what we were just talking about. Learn the language, right? There's a language in this other place you haven't inhabited, and so starting to learn that language helps you to start to understand how big a translation, how big a gap you've got, and how to start positioning it. And again, I'm going to be sort of broken record, but starting with networking and then going to resume and cover letter. I think oftentimes we think of how do I create a resume, or how do I create a cover letter that will get me that? To me, that's the next step.
Right.
And I'll just, second and third that comment on networking. I mean, networking really is the key to get to where you want to go. It really is. And, doing what I would call informational interviews, tapping into your network. Who do you know? Who do you know that may know somebody? And, you know, I believe that I use the 3-foot rule. Anyone that's within 3 feet of you is somebody that you should be networking with, even if you're standing in a grocery line. You never know. So when you start talking with other people about what you're thinking about doing, they will help you, you know, obviously networking with people that are doing what you want to do. And a great way to research that is using LinkedIn. I'm a firm believer in LinkedIn.
Thank you. One of the questions that has come in through the QA, and remember, you can type in questions, just use that QA feature at the bottom of your screen. I want to read this one. I have a skill set that is not common for my age. That I find that I am swimming in the pool of 20-year-olds. How do I show my peers and clients that age does not matter? I need to market myself, and this is an issue. And I could link that to one of the pre-submitted questions was asking, are there advantages that Encore Career candidates tend to have that could be played up in presenting oneself? So Ted, do you want to start us off on that one?
Yeah, let me go to the other half before the advantage piece. Let me actually kind of answer the other piece. I think there's ways to think about how I might be being perceived. It may or may not be fair, right? You know, age bias on some level might be there. So, you know, one of the questions that often comes up is technical skills. You know, do I have the technical skills? How can I prove I have technical skills? My response to that is break it down. In this specific instance where you're, you know, swimming with 20-year-olds, what are the technical skills that are a part of that, and how can you show up with those skills, or gain those skills, or speak to those skills? And you know, I think the other piece there too is learning, right? I think that one of the strongest things that any job can do for any role, any position, is demonstrate the ability to learn. And to me, that's something that I think is really helpful in getting past bias. I may not know this particular thing, or you may not see me knowing this particular thing, but I can show you and demonstrate that I've learned this and this and this. And so I can learn, I can figure this out. Those couple things I think are really, really useful and important. But I just want to, more than anything, call out the importance of the question, right? That idea of thinking about the way, you know, bias might show up in that space.
And I might just, that's great, Ted. You know, you and I are very much aligned. One of the things I just want to point out is your own self-perception. Ted talked about networking and finding out what other people are thinking. But many times, a lot of people that I work with, and the whole 50+ job seekers program was conceptualized on a napkin because I was dealing with so many people that were being laid off in the .com crash who were 50+ or 60+. Many of them had been my clients and had never been laid off in their life. And what I noticed amongst all of them is this like preconceived notion about themselves and their age. Like the common question to me was, who's going to hire me now? So the first thing you need to do is get rid of that brain clutter that's really self-sabotage, because you have a lot to offer. Age is your advantage. And I could spend a lot of time talking about that. But there are a number of selling points, bullets that you can create about why your age is your advantage. Your years of experience. You have a lot of intellectual property that's up here that can never be replaced. And I see it all the time. Companies will lay off an experienced worker, and then they end up having to hire 2 or 3 20-something people to try to figure out what that person was doing. So I'm just, you know, at the tip of the iceberg on this. I could spend hours talking about this, but the first thing would be get rid of the brain clutter and start making a list of all the reasons why you should be hired. Because
I could just play off that for 1 second, Susan, because it also tied to some of the other questions that came through. One, first of all, awesome point. I want to just sort of like, we are so aligned, it's crazy. But second of all, the passion that you kind of come through with, to me, that's really powerful. You know, we need to find people in our lives that can kind of bring that passion. No, you are great, right? Because I think sometimes when we're in this phase of the journey, that notion of self-perception that you bring up can start to suffer a little bit, right? To me, I kind of take a step back and say, that's normal. That's part of the process. You're going to have, you know, identity quakes, right? That's going to be part of the process. That just is. And so then how do we maintain that self-perception? And, you know, again, going down a list of a million things, but the trusted cluster, right, is part of it. I think also, what are those things that you do that help you to maintain your equilibrium now? What are the habits? What are the things that you do around self-care now? It's more important than ever when beginning this kind of exploration, because there will be some level, some pushback on, and there'll be some rejection, you know, that comes through. That's just part of the game.
Well, the other thing is, and I'll just add, is that, you know, I do this whole, you know, truth or, you know, the myths of ageism. Ageism, now, by the way, ageism is alive and well, unfortunately, and it really does exist in the job search process and in the workplace. I was on a statewide advisory board on how to eliminate ageism. It's like, you know, it's a lifelong question, but you might want to think about what you perceive to be the myths, like older workers don't have the energy, they don't have the technical skills. You know, think about all the myths that you hear all the time, and then reverse engineer those to prove that they're wrong. Okay. And I agree with Ted. I truly believe in lifelong learning. If you've got a gap somewhere, go out and take a course.
Another question that's come through on the QA, I think this would be a good something I'd ask you to maybe to speak to a little bit, Susan, is about getting some experience in the field you are trying to break into. You know, are there opportunities for Encore Career seekers that you might call attention to?
Okay, so that's where we get into, I am really passionate about volunteerism. Everybody that I work with, no matter where you are in your life, I encourage, I shall say demand, that people volunteer in some way. My father instilled this in me, and I'm passing it forward to everybody on my path. Volunteerism is a pathway to your Encore career. And if you're not sure what you want to do, and you have a couple of different ideas, this is a perfect way to try things out. There are all different kinds of internships, fellowships, returnships. There are all sorts of organizations. I'll just mention a few. Encore Boston Network, they do all different kinds of workshops. There are all different kinds of volunteer opportunities. And it's also, again, we're going to keep saying this, volunteering is an unbelievable way to build out your network. You never know who you're going to meet when you're volunteering. And many volunteer opportunities actually lead to a position. I'm working right now. I just was contacted by the Board of Selectmen here in my town of Scituate. They're starting up a Scituate Visitor Center. It's a nonprofit. They've been in existence now. They have a board of directors, but they're looking for an executive director to take over this whole nonprofit entity, starting out as a volunteer, but once they get enough funding, their intent is to hire the person full-time into this permanent position. And if any of you are interested, let me know, send me an email. But AARP, encore.org, even the 50+ job seekers program that I started has a really robust website that we created. And there's a resource page there that's just filled with all sorts of categories of resources for you to use, of ways that you can try out. And some of them are actually paid internships or returnships.
Thank you. We've had some questions about strategies for someone who recognizes, you know, they might have some gaps that in pursuit of the particular Encore career they're going for. There might be a skills gap, something they need to do that involves either a credential or a degree. And they're wondering whether there are specific avenues they should be aware of, strategies for looking for schools or programs that would meet that. Ted, do you have a?
Yeah, just a quick one on that. I think I would almost wouldn't answer that in a blanket way, right? Because it depends so much on the actual credential, the actual thing. And so the first thing is to do some troubleshooting, some myth busting, as Susan was talking about before, of what really is required. You know, so for example, in the medical field, of course, there's all kinds of credentials that are just simply are required. But other places, maybe they're not. You know, so do some homework in that place. And then, you know, from there, you know, I think there's an underlying question in there too. Are there certain particular programs that are more sort of amenable to encore, you know, seekers, to folks who are more advanced in their careers, et cetera? And, you know, my take on that is that I've not seen any particular organization, any particular educational institution that is sort of discriminatory against, you know, folks that are, you know, have more experience, et cetera. It's more kind of looking at how friendly they are in that space. In other words, do they have services listed, you know, that are supportive, in particular in their career centers, et cetera, you know, in that space. But you know, beyond that, I think that I don't think there's a specific separate path that an Encore person takes to find those kind of programs.
Thank you.
If I could just jump in, I know we're getting close to time here, but there are actually a few online, you know, sites that are really helpful for people that are looking for certifications or even for a degree. One that I recommend all the time is Coursera.org, and also edx.org is another one, and LinkedIn has a whole lifelong learning section. The other thing I want to mention is that if you go onto the Massachusetts, at least here in Massachusetts, website, there is their Office of Student Financial Assistance, and there's actually a section on categorical waiver for tuition. And there are a number of colleges listed that will actually waive tuition for people that are 60 plus. There are other categories as well. So those are like, you automatically know those are age friendly. I mean, if they're willing to help you out with tuition.
I guess some of this comes back to the point of doing the research. That's
yes,
part of the work
exactly.
of being an Encore Careers, is doing your research. Seeing how close we are to the end of the hour, I'm sorry we have to wrap up the Q&A here, but thank you both for all those great responses. I'm sorry we couldn't get to every question, but I hope all of you, you know, listening to that have found the discussion helpful. Before we go, we want to have one last poll. Now that you've heard about some real life examples and learned about the essential questions to ask and the 6 steps to take, we'd like to know, how ready are you to pursue an Encore career? So 5 more seconds and we'll start showing you these results.
Wow.
Wow.
Nice.
So we see
We have a lot of people ready to jump
right in, 24%, you know, considering, 47% researching my options. Well,
Thank you to the 2 people who were really honest and said they're kind of scared. Thank you.
Thank you everyone for the questions, for responding, for the polls, for attending today. I hope you've found it helpful wherever you are in your journey here. Please follow us on social media, Harvard Professional Development Programs, and visit our website to keep up to date on our programs. Within the next few days, a recording of this webinar will be sent to the email address that you used to register for the event. It was great to have you join us. Have a lovely rest of your day.